Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show where we break down the stories everyone's talking about and explore why they matter. So if you've been online recently or catching up on global news, you've probably seen it. This incredible surge of energy halfway across the world. We're talking about Nepal, a country many picture for its stunning mountains, the Himalayas. But right now, it's alive with something else entirely.
A different kind of energy?
Exactly. The energy of huge public demonstrations. I mean, try to picture the streets, not just the usual hustle and bustle, but absolutely packed. Thousands of people.
Yeah.
Their voices rising together, demanding change. And what's striking is the videos, the stories from people right there on the ground. They aren't just staying in Nepal.
No, they're everywhere, spreading globally.
It paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it? A nation really striving for something. It makes you stop and think, what's actually driving all this? And why is it hitting a nerve so far beyond Nepal itself?
That's exactly what we want to get into today. We're going to try and unpack the layers behind these 2025 protests in Nepal.
Okay.
We'll be looking closely at the information we have, the sources, to understand the history leading up to this, the immediate sparks that set things off.
Right.
And really importantly, what the potential ripple effects might be. For Nepal, obviously, but maybe even for how we think about democracy globally.
So let's start at the beginning then, to really get a handle on this. When did these large-scale protests actually ignite in 2025?
Well, the timeline seems pretty clear from our sources. It looks like large-scale protests really erupted across Nepal in 2025.
And it felt quite sudden, right? Not a slow burn, but more of a rapid surge.
Exactly. A rapid mobilization, which usually signals that, some kind of critical point has been reached, people have had enough.
And the reasons, what were the immediate catalysts identified?
It wasn't just one single thing. The materials point to a combination, really. Widespread dissatisfaction with government policies that people felt weren't working for them. Deep frustration with corruption, which seems to be a persistent issue.
Right, that feeling of things being unfair, rigged.
Precisely. And then a general sense that there was just a lack of real progress on key social issues, things that affect people's everyday lives.
So it paints a picture of a population that maybe after years of hoping for change, just felt they couldn't wait any longer.
I think that's a fair assessment. Our sources suggest this isn't entirely new either. This eruption in 2025, it kind of echoes earlier democratic frustrations.
Like the ones that led to the monarchy ending back in 2008.
Exactly. It highlights this ongoing struggle, maybe even a cycle, for genuine systemic change, not just, tinkering around the edges.
So this dissatisfaction isn't just a reaction to recent events.
No, it seems much deeper. It's an accumulation. Years, maybe decades of unresolved issues piling up. When you see protests on this scale, it almost always means that frustration has hit boiling point.
And Nepal's history definitely shows a pattern of political change, of being in flux.
It does. So these 2025 protests, while happening now, they didn't just appear out of thin air. They're built on past experiences, expectations, and, frankly, disappointments.
Can we get more specific? When we talk about government policies, what kind of things are we actually referring to based on the materials?
Well, the sources hint at things like recent decisions about land allocation, for example,
Okay.
where there's a perception that maybe big companies or political insiders are benefiting more than local farmers or communities.
And that would hit hard in a country where agriculture is so important.
Absolutely. It feeds directly into economic inequality and sparks anger, especially in rural areas.
And corruption. You mentioned that's pervasive.
Yes, the sources suggest it's not just isolated incidents, but often feels systemic. It pops up in critical areas like, say, public contracts or building infrastructure.
So money meant for roads or schools potentially going missing?
That's the allegation, or that it gets diverted. And that has a direct impact on people's daily lives. It erodes trust massively, makes people deeply cynical about government.
Yeah, you can see how that would fuel anger. And the lack of progress on social issues. What does that cover?
That implies things just aren't moving forward in areas vital for quality of life. Maybe persistent problems, getting good education, reliable healthcare, or even basic things like electricity or clean water, particularly outside the main cities.
So these aren't abstract political points. They're about daily survival and future opportunities.
Exactly. They're the daily realities. And when people feel the system isn't delivering, or worse, is actively working against them, that's when you see this kind of profound frustration boil over.
That context is really helpful.
Yeah.
So given all that, what are the protesters actually demanding? What are the key things they want changed based on these grievances?
Well, starting with those government policies. When people are dissatisfied, they're usually asking for a fundamental shift, right?
Towards policies that actually help ordinary people.
Precisely. More inclusive, fairer policies. Things that tackle everyday struggles. Our sources imply demands that could range from, say, better support for farmers.
Like fair prices for their crops.
Yes. Or better access to markets. Or in cities. Maybe policies addressing the lack of affordable housing or reliable public transport. Or even fairer taxes.
So practical changes that make a difference.
Exactly. Policies that address youth unemployment, food security, wages, keeping up with costs, things that show the government is serving the broad population.
And the call to tackle corruption. What does that look like in terms of demands?
It's usually about more than just punishing a few individuals, though that's part of it. It's about systemic change.
Transparency. Accountability.
Yes. Protesters are likely demanding things like independent investigations into alleged corruption, tougher penalties for officials found guilty, and maybe reforming how government contracts are awarded to prevent graft in the first place.
Because it touches everything, doesn't it? How money is spent, the legal system.
Everything. It impacts the integrity of public services and people's basic trust in the state.
Okay. And finally, the lack of progress on social issues. What are the specific demands there?
This points to a desire for tangible improvements. So, likely demands for more funding and real reform in education, better healthcare access, especially outside Kathmandu.
Infrastructure improvements, too, like reliable power.
Absolutely. Reliable electricity, safe drinking water, better roads, and potentially addressing deeper social justice issues like discrimination based on caste or gender inequality.
So it's a call for a government that actively works to improve life for everyone, not just a select few.
That's the core of it, I think. These aren't just separate complaints. They're all interconnected. They represent this fundamental aspiration for better governance, a better quality of life.
And it ties back to that idea of democratic accountability.
Deeply. It's about the social contract, isn't it? The understanding between the people and those who govern them. When people feel ignored or that their needs are consistently pushed aside.
That contract starts to break down.
Exactly. So these demands aren't just policy tweaks. They're often a really profound call for a government that's more responsive, more transparent, fairer.
A government that actually reflects the will of the people.
Yes. That translates votes into real improvements and responsible leadership. The protests suggest a strong feeling that this isn't happening effectively enough.
So, faced with these significant demands and this level of public pressure, how did the government actually respond on the ground?
Our sources mention two key things. Crowd control measures on one side.
Okay, that sounds potentially confrontational.
It can be. And on the other side, mixed messaging on concessions.
Let's take crowd control first. What does that typically mean in practice? Does it imply clashes?
It refers to the methods security forces use to manage large crowds. The aim is usually stated as maintaining order, preventing violence or damage.
But it can escalate things too.
It certainly can. The materials suggest the government in Nepal used various tactics, deploying riot police in large numbers, definitely.
Oh.
Using things like water cannons, tear gas in some areas. There are also hints of temporary restrictions, maybe on gatherings or movement in protest hotspots.
So a pretty firm response.
Yes, showing the state trying to contain the dissent. But it immediately raises that tension, doesn't it, between maintaining order and the right to peaceful protest.
And people can easily see it as heavy-handed.
Which can fuel more anger, not less. Then you have the mixed messaging on concessions. That's really interesting.
What does that usually signal? Indecision, strategy.
It could be several things. It often suggests a government under pressure, maybe struggling internally to agree on a response.
Different factions wanting different approaches.
Possibly. Or it could be strategic ambiguity, floating vague promises to buy time, maybe try to divide the protesters or test the waters without committing fully.
Does that work?
It's risky. Clear messages can unite or alienate, but mixed messages create uncertainty for everyone. Protesters don't know where they stand, and it makes it harder for the government to manage the situation effectively. It can just prolong the unrest.
And while all this is happening locally, these events quickly jumped borders, didn't they? The sources say the protests drew international coverage.
Yes, significantly so. They became visible on a global stage.
Which brings in that idea of global solidarity. Local struggles finding resonance worldwide.
It's a powerful factor. International media attention plays a huge role now.
How so?
Well, firstly, it amplifies the protesters' message massively. It takes their grievances, their demands out to a global audience that might not otherwise know what's happening.
And that puts pressure on the government back home.
Absolutely. Governments become very aware they're being watched, judged internationally,
Yeah.
that scrutiny can influence their actions, maybe push them towards dialogue rather than just crackdowns, because they worry about condemnation or even sanctions.
There's a form of external pressure.
Yes. And secondly, it connects these specific protests in Nepal to this bigger global conversation about human rights, democracy, accountability.
People see parallels elsewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The calls for reform, ending corruption, social justice in Nepal. They don't sound all that different from movements in other parts of the world. It fosters a sense of shared struggle.
Do specific international groups get involved?
Our sources suggest that international NGOs, human rights organizations, they've been quite vocal, monitoring the situation, calling for restraint, urging respect for rights. That creates a network of support that can be really important for movements on the ground.
And technology must play a massive part in making all that possible. The digital side of this.
Oh, absolutely pivotal. The internet, social media, they're the backbone.
The sources highlight how social media platforms have amplified voices from the ground, spreading videos and testimonies globally. It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
Anyone with a phone could become a reporter, capturing things instantly.
Yeah.
The emotion, the scale.
Unfiltered. It bypasses the traditional media gatekeepers to some extent, creates this direct connection between people on the streets and a global audience.
Fostering that collective action you mentioned.
Almost in real time, the speed and reach are just different from anything before.
And this ties into who is often leading these digital efforts, right? The youth.
Very much so. It connects directly to the idea of youth power. Young activists, students, they're often central to mobilizing people in these modern movements.
Because they're so digitally native.
Exactly. Their digital literacy, their constant engagement with social media, it makes them incredibly effective organizers and communicators online.
So it's not just sharing updates, it's practical organizing.
Yes, the materials hint at platforms like TikTok, Twitter being used for very concrete things, sharing protest locations, times, safety advice, legal contacts.
Live streaming events even.
Live streaming events as they happen, yeah. It completely changes how protests are started, how they're sustained, how they're perceived by the outside world.
Information spreads incredibly fast.
Almost instantly. It coordinates action efficiently, and it gives people a powerful, accessible way to voice their dissent. One person's frustration, shared online, can suddenly find a huge echo and become part of a collective movement very quickly.
Making youth a really powerful force.
A formidable force in shaping the conversation and driving action.
And that digital reach creates these global echoes we talked about. It's not just the big news networks covering it.
No, it's a much wider phenomenon.
Hashtags play a big role here, don't they? The sources mention hashtag Nepal protests as an example.
Hashtags like that, maybe others like hashtag Kathmandu Uprising or hashtag Nipple for Change, they become crucial.
How so?
They act like digital rallying points. They create these streams of information, photos, videos, opinions that anyone can follow and contribute to.
Connecting people across borders.
Instantly, it's global solidarity in action. Hashtags allow someone in, say, London or New York to feel connected, to show support, share information, track what's happening moment by moment.
Like a virtual town square for the movement.
That's a great way to put it. It creates this shared awareness, this collective consciousness that just wasn't possible on this scale before.
And those videos and testimonies we mentioned earlier, they offer something different from traditional news reports.
They often offer that raw, unfiltered perspective. The emotion, the urgency, the human side of it all. It helps an international audience feel a much deeper connection, I think.
A kind of citizen journalism shaping global views.
And that can exert real moral pressure. But there's a downside to this speed and openness too, isn't there?
Ah, yes. The problem of misinformation.
Exactly. The same ease of sharing that amplifies genuine voices can also be used to spread false or misleading information.
The double-edged sword. How does that affect things on the ground?
It makes the environment incredibly complex. In the middle of fast-moving events, something explosive, true or false, can go viral instantly.
And the sources mentioning videos and testimonies implicitly flags that risk.
Right. Not everything shared might be accurate, or it might lack context. Misinformation, whether it's deliberate disinformation or just accidental rumors.
It can really damage the movement.
It can undermine credibility, sow confusion, create distrust. Opponents can use it to discredit legitimate concerns. It can even incite violence in some cases.
Making it hard for people to know what's real.
Very hard. That's why independent fact-checking becomes so vital. People trying to verify videos, cross-reference stories, debunk false claims. It's a constant battle to protect the integrity of the information flow, and by extension, the movement itself.
A really crucial ongoing challenge in today's world. Okay, let's maybe zoom out a bit now and look at the historical context. These protests aren't happening in isolation.
Not at all.
Our sources emphasize that Nepal has this long, often complex history of political turbulence. Significant upheaval isn't new.
That's right.
A huge moment was obviously the end of the monarchy in 2008, a massive shift from centuries of royal rule to a republic.
A pivotal moment.
But the sources also note that what followed wasn't easy. There were subsequent struggles with governance, suggesting the path to stable democracy has been, well, bumpy.
Very bumpy. And that history is absolutely crucial for understanding 2025. If you connect the dots, you see this recurring pattern of dissent.
Driven by similar issues.
Often, yes. The sources indicate past protests were frequently fueled by calls for democratic reform, crackdowns on corruption, economic justice. These themes persist.
So the post-2008 period didn't fully resolve those underlying issues.
It seems not. There were huge challenges, like drafting the new constitution, which took years, lots of political instability, fragile coalition governments, a feeling perhaps that leaders weren't fully accountable.
Creating a sense that the promise of democracy wasn't quite delivered.
For many average citizens, perhaps yes. So the 2025 protests, they fit right into that historical narrative. They feel like a continuation of these long-standing struggles for real systemic change.
Not just a flash in the pan.
Unlikely. And another key historical point the sources hint at is the precedent of youth involvement.
Ah, yes. Young people have been active before.
Definitely. Think back to the 1990s. The student movement played a big role in bringing about multi-party democracy then. So the strong youth presence in 2025 isn't unprecedented. It shows that young Nepalists have historically been a driving force for change, carrying on a legacy of activism.
So, viewing the 2025 protests through that historical and youth lens, they really do seem to mirror wider global struggles, don't they?
I think they do.
The sources frame it as ongoing dissatisfaction with Nepal's governance, which feels like part of that broader democratic frustration idea we see elsewhere. It's not just about specific Nepalese policies, but maybe a deeper questioning of how well democracy is actually working for ordinary people.
And the core grievances, policy failures, corruption, lack of social progress, these resonate universally, don't they?
Absolutely. Demands for transparency, efficiency, fairness from governments. You hear those calls everywhere.
It raises that fascinating question. What does it signal for global democracy when these local fights for accountability connect so strongly across borders?
What do you think it signals?
Well, it shows how interconnected things are now. These protests in Nepal echo broader global trends. We see citizens everywhere demanding more from their leaders, more integrity, better responsiveness, real progress.
Like a global wave of citizens pushing back.
In a way, yes. Think about recent protest movements. Globally, different contexts, different triggers, but often sharing underlying themes of wanting better governance, less corruption, more social justice.
They learn from each other, inspire each other.
It seems so. Tactics, themes, even symbols can cross borders. It creates this sort of global dialogue about what good governance looks like, about citizen power. The frustrations in Kathmandu might feel very familiar to someone in another capital city far away.
Highlighting this global hunger for accountable leadership.
And a belief that citizens have the right, maybe even the duty, to demand more. It suggests this growing global awareness that local issues are part of a bigger human story about rights and fair societies.
It's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
But bringing it back to Nepal specifically, what are the potential long-term consequences of these current protests? What lies ahead?
Well, the future is obviously uncertain, but the stakes are high.
The sources mention the risks and challenges, particularly the possibility of escalation or government crackdowns. That's a real concern.
It is. There's always this delicate balance. Protests push for change, but they risk provoking a harder response from the state.
Which could either crush the movement or maybe even fuel it further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's unpredictable. But looking longer term, the impact on Nepalese society and governance could be profound.
In what ways?
Several potential paths. On the positive side, this sustained public pressure, especially with youth involvement and global eyes watching, could genuinely catalyze significant reforms.
The government might feel forced to act.
They might address those core grievances more seriously, implement stronger anti-corruption measures, invest more in public services, create more equitable policies. Public pressure is often necessary for that kind of change.
We saw those mixed messages earlier. Maybe they could turn into real concessions.
That's one possibility. But there's also the risk of the opposite. Increased political instability.
How would that look?
Maybe prolonged unrest leads to constantly shifting governments, difficulty passing laws, a sense of paralysis. That instability can harm the economy, deter investment, and actually erode public trust even more.
Downward spiral.
It can be. And then there's the risk you mentioned, a more severe government crackdown. If things escalate or if the state feels existentially threatened, they might use harsher measures.
Which could suppress dissent, at least temporarily.
Or it could backfire and galvanize even more resistance, maybe pushing it underground or towards more extreme tactics.
So a real crossroads moment.
I think so. Beyond specific policies, these protests might fundamentally force a reevaluation of the social contract in Nepal. What do citizens expect from their government? What does the government owe its citizens?
Especially with a new generation leading the charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might see a lasting shift in political expectations towards demanding more transparency, more participation, more accountability. The ultimate outcome really depends on how both sides, the government and the protesters, navigate this period. Can they find a path towards constructive dialogue?
It's a critical juncture with the potential for real transformation, but also significant risks.
Precisely. It could lead to meaningful reform, ongoing instability, or maybe, hopefully, a stronger consensus about Nepal's future path.
It's certainly a situation we'll continue to watch closely. The events in Nepal are a powerful reminder of how local demands for accountability and justice can echo globally in our connected world. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How long can any government truly afford to ignore its people when their voices can now be heard so clearly around the planet? Next time on Trending Unpacked, we'll move from political unrest to music celebration as we spotlight the winners of the Emma Awards 2025 and the artists making waves worldwide.